Linda had always imagined her future as bright, full of possibilities. At just 19, she dreamed of studying at university, traveling, and perhaps one day falling in love with someone her own age. But life rarely follows the path we wish for it, and Linda's world collapsed in an instant when her parents revealed their shocking decision. Her family was drowning in debt. Her father's small business had failed, loans were piling up, and the bank threatened to take away their home. To Linda's horror, the solution her parents chose was unthinkable. She was to marry Sheikh Ibrahim, a 75-year-old man known throughout the region for his wealth and influence. The arrangement would not only save the family from financial ruin but also secure her siblings' future. Linda couldn't believe her ears. "Mama, Papa, please, he's older than my grandfather. I can't do this," she cried, her voice trembling. But her parents remained firm, their eyes filled with both guilt and desperation. "Linda, this is not about choice," her father whispered. "It's about survival. We have no other way." The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of tears and silence. Friends who once spoke to her with laughter now avoided her gaze, whispering behind her back. Some pitied her, others envied her, calling her lucky to be marrying into wealth. But Linda felt no luck in her heart, only fear, humiliation, and a heavy sense of betrayal. The wedding day arrived with all the grandeur money could buy. The palace hall was decorated in gold and white, chandeliers sparkled above the guests, and musicians played sweet melodies that contrasted sharply with Linda's sorrow. She wore a gown embroidered with pearls, her veil so heavy it almost made her stumble. People gasped at her beauty, but when their eyes flicked toward the groom, an old man with silver hair, walking slowly with the aid of a cane, the whispers began. Some guests smiled politely, hiding their judgment. Others leaned close to each other, murmuring words like, unfair, and shameful. Yet none of them dared to voice their disapproval too loudly. Sheikh Ibrahim's fortune silenced critics. To defy him was to invite trouble. As the ceremony began, Linda's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She could barely hear the vows being read. When the time came to join hands with the sheikh, her fingers trembled. His hand, cold and wrinkled, wrapped gently around hers, and though he smiled, she couldn't bring herself to look at him. The feast that followed was loud and lavish. Platters of roasted lamb, exotic fruits, and sweet pastries covered long tables. Guests laughed, drank, and celebrated the union as though it were a fairy tale. But Linda sat in silence, her plate untouched, her smile forced whenever eyes turned toward her. Inside, she felt trapped, like a bird locked in a golden cage. And as the evening ended, the moment she dreaded most drew near, the bridal suite awaited. The servants whispered, the relatives watched with curiosity, and Linda's breath quickened with fear. The doors of her new life were about to close behind her, and she had no idea what awaited on the other side. The grand celebration continued long into the night, but for Linda, every sound of laughter and clinking glasses felt distant, like echoes from another world. She sat stiffly at the head table beside Sheikh Ibrahim, her eyes fixed on her untouched plate. The glow of golden chandeliers reflected off her wedding gown, yet her face remained pale, her smile brittle. Guests continued to flood the hall, bowing respectfully to the sheikh and offering forced congratulations to the young bride. Some whispered words of envy about her beauty and the wealth she had stepped into. Others exchanged glances of pity, their eyes flicking between the fragile young woman and the frail old man beside her. Linda could feel every stare, every unspoken judgment, burning into her skin. The sheikh, however, behaved with surprising calmness. He did not grip her arm tightly, nor force her to smile for the endless stream of visitors. He simply nodded politely, sipping from a small glass of tea, his weathered hands steady despite his age. If he noticed her trembling silence, he did not comment. As the music swelled and dancers filled the hall, Linda's heart beat faster. She felt like a doll put on display, adorned with jewels and silk, admired but lifeless. Inside, fear gnawed at her. She knew the wedding feast would end eventually, and with it, her last shred of security. When the time finally came, the guests clapped as the couple was escorted toward the bridal chambers. Linda's legs felt heavy, her steps slow beneath the weight of her gown. Every hallway of the palace seemed endless, lined with servants who bowed deeply as they passed. The whispers followed her, too quiet to decipher but loud enough to remind her she was walking into the unknown. At last, the carved wooden doors of the suite closed behind them with a heavy thud. Linda froze, her chest rising and falling quickly as though she were trapped in a cage. The room itself was breathtaking, velvet drapes, golden lamps, a bed draped in white silk, but none of its beauty could calm her fear. The sheikh removed his ornate cloak, setting it carefully on a chair. He moved slowly, his cane tapping the marble floor, his breath slightly labored. Linda sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched in her lap, waiting for the inevitable. Her mind raced with terrifying images of what might happen next. She had heard stories from older women about what a wedding night entailed, and the thought of such an act with a man old enough to be her grandfather made her shiver with dread. Silence filled the room. Seconds felt like hours. The sheikh looked at her for a long time, but his expression was unreadable. He did not approach her. Instead, he sank into a chair across the room, his gaze thoughtful, almost sorrowful. Linda's heart pounded. She braced herself, expecting his command, expecting the worst. But instead, he spoke in a voice that startled her, not harsh or demanding, but calm, even weary. And in that single moment, she realized the night would not unfold the way anyone had expected. The silence in the bridal suite stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Linda sat rigidly on the edge of the bed, her gown pooling around her like a trap she couldn't escape. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, her eyes darting nervously toward the old man who sat across the room. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Finally, Sheikh Ibrahim broke the silence. His voice was soft, calm, but laced with something Linda had not expected, weariness. "You are frightened," he said simply. His tone carried no judgment, no anger, only an acknowledgement of the obvious. Linda's throat tightened. She didn't answer, but her trembling hands betrayed her. She wanted to scream, to ask why he had agreed to this union, why he had allowed her parents to sell her into a life she never wanted. But fear held her tongue still. The sheikh leaned back in his chair, resting his cane beside him. For the first time, Linda noticed how fragile he looked. His face, lined with deep wrinkles, carried the weight of decades of experience, but his eyes looked tired, almost lonely. "You believe tonight will be difficult," he continued slowly, as though choosing his words with care. "But you are wrong." Linda blinked, confused. His words didn't match the dread clawing inside her. She expected him to rise, to demand obedience, to remind her of the vows she was forced to speak. Instead, he sighed heavily. "Listen to me, child," he said, his voice low. "I did not want this marriage either. My sons and advisors pushed me into it. They say a man of my status cannot be without a young wife. They fear gossip, whispers of weakness. But in truth, I am tired of playing the role they demand of me." Linda's lips parted in shock. This was not the confession she had imagined. "I am 75 years old," he continued, his gaze fixed on the flickering lamp by the bed. "My body is failing me. The doctors say I have little time left. Do you think I desire to cage a young woman, to steal her youth for my own pride? No, I only wished for peace in my final years." Tears stung Linda's eyes. She didn't know what to say. She had spent days consumed by terror, believing her freedom and dignity would be torn from her on this night. And yet, the man before her spoke not like a predator, but like someone burdened by loneliness. "You are safe here," Sheikh Ibrahim said finally, turning his gaze back to her. "I will not touch you, not against your will. Think of this marriage as a mask, nothing more. Live in this house, study, dream. I ask only for your company, nothing else." The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was different, less threatening, almost fragile. Linda's fear slowly gave way to confusion, then to cautious relief. She still didn't trust him fully, but the monster she had imagined all along seemed to vanish before her eyes. That night, instead of tears or forced intimacy, the two spoke quietly until dawn. The old man shared stories of his youth, of battles fought and empires built, while Linda listened, uncertain but strangely captivated. The wedding night that was expected to break her spirit had instead opened the door to an unexpected truth, one that would change her destiny forever. The days that followed their wedding night felt surreal to Linda. She woke each morning in the grand palace, expecting her world to collapse, expecting that perhaps the sheikh's kindness had only been a fleeting act. But to her astonishment, nothing changed. He kept his word. There were no demands, no threats, no cold reminders of her duty as a wife. Instead, Sheikh Ibrahim treated her with a respect she had never expected. When the household staff addressed her as "Madam," she felt like an imposter, but the sheikh never corrected them. He insisted that she deserved the honor due to her new position. At first, Linda kept her distance, spending hours alone in the gardens, wandering among the fountains and roses. She couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped, even in such beauty. But slowly, the walls of fear began to crumble. Each time the sheikh spoke to her, his words carried no malice, only patience. One evening, as the desert sun melted into the horizon, Sheikh Ibrahim summoned her to his study. The room was filled with towering shelves of books, old manuscripts, and artifacts from his travels. He gestured toward the collection and said, "These are wasted on me now. My eyes fail me. But you should read them. Learn. Fill your mind. Knowledge is the one treasure no one can take from you." Linda was stunned. No one had ever encouraged her dreams so openly. Her own family had dismissed her desire to study, insisting she focus on a woman's duties. And yet here was a man, older than her grandfather, offering her the freedom to pursue the life she had always longed for. In the weeks that followed, a new routine blossomed. During the day, Linda pored over books and practiced her writing, sometimes reading passages aloud when the sheikh joined her. In the evenings, they shared quiet conversations. He told her stories of his youth, of his journeys across deserts, of the leaders he once dined with, of the battles that shaped his name. To her surprise, his voice came alive when he spoke of the past, and for a moment, the years seemed to fall away from him. Linda, in turn, began to share pieces of her own world, her childhood memories, her fears, her secret wish to study medicine one day. He listened intently, never mocking her, never dismissing her dreams. Gradually, the palace staff began to whisper about the strange couple. Servants who once expected a scandal whispered in awe instead. They noticed how the sheikh's eyes softened when Linda entered a room, how her laughter, gentle and rare, echoed through the halls that had once been silent. Their relationship was not one of husband and wife in the traditional sense, but something more unusual, almost like a bond between teacher and student, or even father and daughter. For the first time since her forced marriage, Linda felt a glimmer of hope. She realized she was no longer just a prisoner in a golden cage, she was slowly becoming a woman with power, knowledge, and perhaps even a future she had never imagined. And yet, deep in her heart, she knew this fragile peace could not last forever. Months slipped by, and life in the palace transformed into something Linda never thought possible. The fear that once haunted her nights had been replaced with a strange sense of belonging. She had grown accustomed to reading in the grand library, discussing history and philosophy with Sheikh Ibrahim, and even laughing at his dry, unexpected humor. The man the world viewed as a cold, powerful figure had revealed himself to her as someone far more fragile, far more human. But as the seasons changed, so too did his health. The sheikh's once steady steps grew slower, his voice raspier, his body frailer. Linda often found him sitting silently in the garden, staring at the horizon with distant eyes. Though he tried to mask his decline, she could see the truth: time was catching up with him. Linda began to care for him as one might for a father. She read aloud when his eyes failed, brought him warm tea, and sometimes even scolded him gently when he refused to rest. In those moments, the walls of tradition and duty seemed to vanish. She was no longer a young bride bound by fear, but a companion, a confidant, even a source of comfort in his final days. One cold evening, the sheikh summoned his family to the palace. His sons, daughters, and distant relatives gathered, their faces filled not with grief, but with expectation. They knew his end was near, and they were already calculating the wealth that would soon be theirs. Linda sat quietly at his side, uncertain why she had been asked to stay in the room. The sheikh's voice was weak but steady as he addressed them. "My life has been long," he began, "and I leave this world with few regrets. But I will not allow greed to tear apart what I built." His words silenced the murmurs instantly. Then, with deliberate care, he revealed his decision. Much of his fortune, his estates, and his holdings would go not to his sons, but to Linda. Gasps filled the room. His relatives erupted in protest, their voices sharp with outrage. "She is just a girl," one of his sons cried. "She has no right to our inheritance." But the sheikh raised his hand, and the room fell silent again. "She gave me peace in my final days," he said firmly. "Not one of you sat with me when I was weak. Not one of you brought me comfort when the nights were long. This girl, whom you despised, treated me with kindness and dignity. That is worth more than blood or name." Linda's eyes filled with tears. She had never wanted his wealth, only freedom. And yet here she was, not only free, but entrusted with a legacy that could change her life forever. Days later, the sheikh passed away peacefully, his hand resting in hers. The palace mourned, but whispers quickly spread through the city. The young bride who was once pitied had now become one of the most powerful women in the land. The wedding night that was meant to destroy Linda's spirit had instead become the beginning of her rise. From fear and despair, she had walked into dignity, strength, and an unexpected destiny that would forever silence her doubters.